Ooh, happy Halloween! Couple more days till we get the kitties, till we get the kiddos coming the front door. How the heck is everybody? Welcome to a haunted session, a haunted episode of the Savvy Home Seller Housing Market Show. We talk about all things real estate related and what's going on in the news this week. And we're going to be talking about dead deals and spooky real estate circumstances. Those are descriptive words for something that is actually happening in the real estate market right now. And I just thought I'd have a little fun with that, given that I can't believe Friday is Halloween. Holy cow. It's snuck right up, and I don't know about where you're at. I'm coming here live from Plymouth, Massachusetts, and it is a 50-50 whether these kids are going to be trick-or-treating in the rain. My kids are grown and all the things, but I like it when the little kiddies come to the front door. I just get a kick out of all their costumes and all the things, so I hope it doesn't get rained out. We haven't had a Halloween rained out in many years, so fingers crossed. But I got some stuff cooked up for you guys that are in the headlines. We're gonna touch on a few things, revisit a few things, and have a good conversation. So I'm gonna just go over some house rules real quick, and as always, we're going to make sure I check out the poll. Let's see if I can get my act together here. Holy, what's going? Who's in charge of this show, Jen? First off, post your wins. Post your wins, post your wins. You know, I can't even tell you, another week gone by, another heavy dose of everything that is wrong that is going on in this country, in the world for that matter. There's so much negativity. It's just oozing. And you know what? I'd like to take a break from that by celebrating some successes, because you know what? They're there. They just kind of get squelched. They get, the negative stuff out, is louder than the positive stuff. So post your wins. What have you done, real estate related or otherwise? Post it in the chat. We'll support you in the community and all the things. I want to hear about it so we can celebrate it. If you have questions, put QQQ before the question. It'll pop up in the chat, and that way I'll be able to notice it, because I am a one-man band over here, so I don't have a producer. Just helps me not miss any of your questions. That's the one thing that I don't want to do. And to be honest, it's the one thing that I look forward to with these live streams, is chatting with you guys and helping you and, interacting with you. It's my one opportunity to do so. So make sure that, and, if you're watching this on your television, just a little bit of a tip. Pull out your laptop. That's what I do. Pull out your laptop, because unfortunately you can't type in questions while you're watching it on the TV. Pull out your laptop. Have the laptop muted in the background, and then you can type in the question on the laptop, but then continue to watch it on the TV. There you go. The more you know. Actually, I have a sound effect from way back when, for those that remember. That every time you heard that little jingle, you know what it was. And then, of course, I've actually got a poll going this week. Got a little too busy last week, but not this week. I want to know, what do you think is what is most responsible for the surge in buyer cancellations? 15% of buyers canceled their contracts in September. Why? So I've got multiple choices. I want to know what you guys think on what the answer is there, as the cause for so many people, calling it quits with their transaction. So let me know in the poll, and I'll go over those results at the end of the show. So today we are talking about the 15%. The 15% in September. The September numbers are in. And why is that happening? There's some speculation on that. I'm going to go over some data and how it compares to years prior, as I always do, give you guys perspective on things. And then, of course, give you my commentary. I'm never a loss for words. Anyone that has gotten into a conversation with me knows that. So we're going to also, I want to touch on the Fed meeting. So last week's live stream, I went into detail about the Fed and their meeting and the interest rates and what's the probability of a rate cut, how that could influence the mortgage rates, so on and so forth. Well, they're meeting today and tomorrow. They're meeting. They never announce anything. They don't. There's a reason why it's a 2-day meeting. They're not going to give you the results of the meeting on day one, so we got to wait till tomorrow. But there was some information, some press releases and whatnot a couple hours ago. So I'm going to give you guys some updates on that. And there was some predictions or some things that they think is going to happen as a result of the meeting tomorrow. So I want to touch on that as an update. And keeping with the spirit here, I came across an article with the top, I think, 10 or 15 towns to buy. If you enjoy spookiness, if you enjoy the Halloween spirit, one of my good friends growing up, her birthday's actually in October. It's bigger than Christmas in her house, Halloween. She digs it. It's her jam. All the things. She posted pictures on Facebook the other day, and oh my goodness, she's embracing it. But I'm in Plymouth. Plymouth's got a lot of history, but if you like that kind of thing, there are some towns across the country that you may want to think about moving to. So just for fun, I pulled that article up and whatnot. So I want to jump over. Let's see what's happening in the chat real quick before we jump in. See who's hanging out. We got let's see here. Hugh, good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. And we've got I'm glad you're here. Super glad. We got retirement is underrated. Good to see you, my friend. Miss H is in the house. We got Mandamo coming in from Denver. Michael coming in from Mesa, Arizona. Ooh, nice 84 temps. Let me tell you something. It is cold, typical New England weather today. Cold, rainy, overcast. It's chilly. It's chilly and raw, and we're supposed to get some stormy weather the next couple days. So we'll see what happens. But it is definitely sweater weather up here in New England for sure. We've got Skate 76 from Townsend, Mass. Good to see you. We've got Tracy B in the house. Good to see you. Good to see you. We've got Robbie, Texas, 2-year-old. 3-2 manufactured, 1 acre, nice neighborhood. No showings. Yeah, it's a bit challenging down in those southern of the Sun Belt states. That it is a bit challenging right now with traffic. And this is 3 weeks on MLS. Definitely want to check with your agent on what the data says. What is the average? What's the median traffic going on? Over there, what people can expect, so you can manage your expectations. We got Wiggly Arm Guy coming in from sunny Arizona, and excellent. Retirement underrated. Met with your recommended realtor. Very good. Keep me posted. Please let me know how it works out. I'll swing back and check in on you and see how that goes. Hugh News decided to lock my refi rate 5.99%. That's a great rate. Holy cow. Let's see, we've got a couple QQQs coming in already, and that's awesome. I'm going to put a pin in it because I will come back to it after. I want to dig into this first, into the article about the cancellations first, and then we'll come back to it. We've got Clark in the house. Paul T's got closing in 2 days. Woohoo! 98% of asking price. You know what? Run with it, my friend. Absolutely. So you know what? Let's dive right in to the main event here, which is this article that came through. It popped up on a couple different news articles. The source article was from Redfin. Redfin did the data, supplied the data, and sellers are getting ghosted. 15% of home buying contracts canceled in September. So the September numbers came out, and it says housing. Halloween is kind of fun. this fun descriptive language. Housing costs are frightful, and economic jitters are in the air, leading some buyers to leave sellers in the lurch. Well, the housing market is kind of scary, so we'll give it that. It says just over 53,000 home purchase agreements nationwide were canceled in September, equal to 15% of homes that went under contract that month. That's up from 13.6 a year earlier. So what they did is they are looking at, the graph here is all the months, all the data from 2017 to current. However, they highlighted because it is seasonal, which is why you'll see these ebbs and flows. And, as I've talked about before, data is seasonal, the market is seasonal, and there's a natural rhythm to the real estate market. There's always a high in the typically in the spring. You're going to see you're going to see the market increase. There's a slope up. There's a intensity. Housing prices, that's typically where the housing prices tend to appreciate the most. There's also the most amount of buyer traffic, and it kind of settles down in the summer, and then it goes up. There's a bump in the fall. Typically, the fall is not as big as the spring. This year was a little different, actually. It was reversed. And then it settles down in the winter. But so they strategically looked at September to September, which is smart. And it goes on to say that the data is seasonal, which is why we compare this September to past Septembers. And it says, please note that homes that fell out of contract during a given month didn't necessarily go under contract the same month. So that goes to say that it could have gone under contract in August, takes a couple weeks to maybe have a home inspection, or maybe they, go to a purchase contract, different contingencies for different states. So it could have gone under contract in August and then, fell apart in September. But they look at the 15%, this 15% increase from September last year. And is it something that to take notice? Yes, I would say so. But you can see a trend that this is not the first time there's an ebb and flow based on what's been happening in the market for the last couple of years. You saw a similar increase in September 2023. And there's a couple different reasons, and it's happening for different reasons. There's not necessarily a commonality of, of a rinse and repeat here, but it is something that is not out of the norm. It's like I mentioned before, I like to give you guys perspective on things, because you read these headlines, and knowledge is power, right? To understand behind the headlines, because you take things for face value, and there's a buyer seeing this headline that could cause anxiety, fear, and they start second guessing, and now all of a sudden they start considering pulling out of the contract just because they saw a headline. But it's not just one headline, it's multiple headlines. So, which I think is one of my poll options, is the media. Oh, the media. Oy vey. The media has been weaponized for sure. Mm. So, it says that, goes on to say, the home buyers are ghosting sellers at a higher rate some parts of the country. Of course, it's going to, affect different parts of the country, different rates. And there are the top 10 metros where home buyers are ghosting the sellers, where it's most common. So we've got Tampa, Florida, which is not, given the reasons of what's happening in Florida, and actually it goes into it in a little bit more in depth in a second here, but this does not surprise me. San Antonio, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia, Florida, Orlando, Florida, Texas, California. There's certain areas in California where people are second guessing. HOAs, natural disasters, insurance. These things are all on the rise. Another Florida, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Jacksonville, Texas, and Dallas, and then Nevada. You can see there is a trend in terms of the top 10 in terms of locale in the country. And it goes on to say that the buyers are ghosting sellers at a fairly high rate nationwide, mainly because each party has different expectations for the deal. This is, I'm in reading this, there's so many opportunities, so many nuggets here that I want to drop on you guys. It says the buyers are each party has different expectations, and they aren't willing to compromise. That's especially true when it comes to concessions and repairs, leading to a growing number of deals falling through. So I'll pause here for just a second. So given the state and then why now is maybe much different than 2 years ago, given the state of the societal conditions, political conditions, just the general mindset. This is my commentary, what I was thinking about when I was reading this article and just reflecting on this statement. Each party has different expectations and they aren't willing to compromise. This is something that is holding true with everything right now. Everything's polarized. Everyone's digging in. Everyone thinks they're right. That's a natural, default for a lot of folks. And everyone says, I'm not, because of that, I'm not going to give in. I'm entitled to X, I'm entitled to Y, whatever it may be. That conflict, it may not be new. And I can tell you, being in this business for almost 30 years, it'll be 30 years next June. Yes, I have seen that time and time and time again with buyers and sellers. Why? Because this is not just a real estate transaction. This is their home. And when you're talking about selling your home, buying your future home, emotions come into play. And when emotions come into play and you don't see eye to eye with the other party, those emotions can easily take over, get out of hand. It takes a lot of finesse. It takes some good guidance by some good agents to keep everybody kind of get on the down low to kind of, come to a happy medium. But there's no such thing as an agreement, a transaction where one side wins everything. Those deals typically go south because the other side is resentful of them. The buyers say, I want it all. And the seller's like, well, what about me? And vice versa. And over the years, those usually you could find a common ground. You want to find a win-win. You're not going to get everything on your wish list. You want to get the things that are most important. And you kind of find, okay, well, if I want this, what's the seller really want? And maybe we can find a happy medium. That's what my job is. Number one, to find out. And number two, try to brainstorm, coordinate a situation where both parties feel like they've won, feel like they have, they've been justified. That is not happening in this society right now. That is not happening in this country. So if you're already emotionally charged going into it, is that going to affect a real estate transaction or real estate negotiations? Yeah. You better believe it. It is increasingly hard, which, my opinion means that you need to have, it's even more important than ever. More important than ever. I talk about this all the time on the channel with, the 80% versus the 20% agent and that truly after all my years in this business, that I believe 80%, probably more, of the real estate agents in this industry. And I know I get a lot of pushback by, agents in the industry, don't like me saying this, but tough. It's my opinion. It's my show. I can say what I want to say. I'm entitled to my opinion, but it's from observation that more than 80%, they just don't have the chops. They don't have the skill set to be able to bring in a delicate situation to bring those two parties together. That is happening as we speak. And when you combine that, goes on with saying that, in a market where home prices and mortgage rates are high, competition's low, buyers want the home they buy to be perfect. Another expectation that is not necessarily new, but is definitely coming to the forefront. And it says sellers, for their part, want to get the price they have in mind and avoid losing money on the deal. Some sellers who bought during the pandemic may also need to sell their home at a certain price to avoid taking a loss and are unwilling to negotiate. Well, from a home buyer standpoint, you could easily say, well, a seller that is, unwilling to negotiate, they're being selfish. They're being selfish because they've held the cards for so long and they made so much money during the pandemic and it's their fault for buying the house and yada, 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 yada. The thing you need to the thing that I would say that you should, if those thoughts are flowing through your brain, try to keep in mind, number one, empathy, understanding, and at any given time, we make decisions based on the information that we have in the situation that we're in at the moment. And if you have a situation where you're relocating, say, I saw a lot of folks selling their home. A lot of folks that had a lot of equity selling their home during COVID to move, and there was a big push to move to be near their adult children, their grandchildren. Why? People are dying everywhere. They're dying everywhere during the pandemic. They want to be, you know what? Quality of life, quality of life. I want to be near my kids. I will pay $50,000 over asking to get that house because that's one day sooner I'll be able to be near my kids, my grandkids. Did that happen? Yeah. Can you fault them? No. It was the decision they made at the moment. But now fast forward, maybe situations changed and they want to go back to the place that they were at, or whatever the circumstance may be. And now they look at the numbers. They say the numbers don't. I need to make this certain number. You can't pass judgment. You shouldn't pass judgment on the other party, whether you're a buyer or seller, if you're not in their shoes. And so it's to say that they're wrong or right is without information is a tough place to be. The other thing that I would say, just in terms of the commentary, that they said buyers want their home to be perfect. My commentary on that, and there's a lot of shifts. And when I was reading this article, I said, you know what, this is a lot of stuff that I've noticed for sure over the last 10 years, 5 years especially. There is a push, and I've talked about this in previous live streams, where buyers either don't want to or unwilling to buy a home that needs anything. Buying a house, even if it's in the right location, even if it's the right layout, even if it's the size they need, if it's not ideal, they have to they need to do work. They're going to walk away. So what happens is that they start looking at homes that don't need any work, but maybe are on the upper price range, but they don't want to pay for it because they don't think they should, for all the multiple reasons of the challenges of buyers during the pandemic, which was horrendous, and it was hard. It was hard. It was very hard. So to say that, to have a buyer, and I've seen this firsthand with unusual expectations, unrealistic expectations for a home, and they have a home inspection. And actually, I want to go into, if we have time on the live stream, I've got I want to talk about the new home inspection law in Massachusetts, first of its kind in the country. I want to touch on that because we might see more states that might pick up on it. But after a home inspection, there's always things. And let me tell you, in a brand new house, there's going to be, there's that 1-year-old house, there's going to be things on a home inspection. Nobody gets out of a home inspection alive. There's always going to be something, but you've got to separate the safety from the reasonable. There's going to be reasonable things that homes need. And the clash with buyers and sellers, if a buyer comes in and says, I want the house to be perfect, I need you to fix this, or this, or I'm going to walk, and they start threatening sellers, the reason why the contracts are failing and canceling, takes two to tango. A buyer can make the demands, but if the seller meets the demands, the contract doesn't fall apart. So it's not just the buyers, it's the two. The buyers are making the demands. The seller's like, nope, they're not reasonable. Heck you. I'm out. I'll either put it back on the market, or I'll take it off the market and wait until the spring, or whatever. Takes two to tango. So there's some interesting dynamics going on that are happening now that are causing some of these things that may not have happened 2-3 years ago. So I want to jump in the chat. Oh, I see some great questions. Some super awesome questions. All right. Okay, first off, Miss H Says, Jen, I saw something that happened in Hawaii real estate. Have you seen that? I didn't get to read it all, but wanted to know if you saw anything about. I have no idea. I don't know. Something that happened in Hawaii real estate. I know there was a famous baseball player that was that got into a lot of hot water, that was trying to negotiate a deal and then ended up tried to back out and all the things, and he got in trouble. But aside from that, I I haven't heard anything. I'll let you know if I do. Um, and Robbie wants to know about the fact that he has had no, 3 weeks and no showings at 180,000. So at 3 weeks, regardless of the market that you're in, if you have absolutely no activity, it is time to take a step back and re-examine the data. You need to look at what is selling in your market, what's not selling in your market. The thing that a lot of folks, the thing you want to watch out for, and the trap that a lot of home sellers fall into, and bad agents for that matter, is they price their home to based on other homes in the neighborhood. So in other words, not sold homes, but homes that are actively listed. So you see another property on the market for 180,000, and you say, "Well, my house is just as good as that. I'm going to price it at 180,000." Well, that house down the street, 180,000, could be overpriced. It could be overpriced. Number one. Number two, there's yes, there are track homes. There are neighborhoods where the builder is boom, 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 but it's highly unlikely that the houses are identical in attributes and condition. Everybody has a different version of housekeeping and presentation. So there could be minor differences, maybe minor to you, but maybe not so much for the buyers. It could be how the house is presented online. If it were me, I'd be following and uh, really kind of auditing what my agent's doing, and make sure that you have professional photos and aerial if if it's appropriate, and 360 tour, walkthrough tours, Matterport type tours. You want to try to provide as much information to the buyers as possible, but you want to, audit that, but then also look at the price. 3 weeks, you probably need a price drop at this point. But you also want to make sure you know what the data is on what the, average time for selling is in your, for average times for offers that are in your market. The other thing too is we use a service called Showing Time here, and it's a computer data center where the real estate agent, buyer agent showing requests flow through. It's a service I provide no cost to my clients, and it because basically it just allows me to stay on top of all, everything that's happening at the house, with people coming and going and all the things, and it does help add a little extra level of security because it vets out, the agents, make sure they're licensed and all the things. But if your agent is a member of that service, you can get into the data. So you can see what other homes are showing, what the traffic is in your area on that service. Even though they're not there, that agent's listings, they'll have access to that data. So you know that in your town, how many showings are happening now versus a month ago, so that you can, monitor trends. So just as a side note, if the agent's using that service or a similar type service, there's data on the back end that you can get just to understand the market. Samuel says, is it normal for realtors to ask for a referral fee from contractors? It is a super, super, super violation for referral fees. We are prohibited. That's a license. That's grounds for losing your license. I cannot accept any referral fees from anyone other than a licensed real estate agent. Nothing. My, go-to attorney, right, wants to give me $50. Nope. I can't take a nickel. Nada. I can't take a gift card. Nada. Like it's pretty serious stuff. We can't do we no, it is not normal. And that is a National Association of Realtors policy. So if the agent's not a member of the NAR, then that's a wild, wild west. But no, that is not normal. They cannot do that at all. Which is why when I recommend contractors, I will give the name of a contractor, try to give a couple. Nowadays it's getting hard, but just, there's no pressure. This is, recommendation, but do your homework. Do your homework. Oh, we got a win. Tracy says, finally closing on my home this Friday. Woohoo! New home closing November 4th. Yay! Good for you. Super happy for you. Congratulations. Let's see. Paul T says our first buyer lobbed a too good to be true contract at us, and we unfortunately bit. They changed the terms of the contract, canceled after we said no. Selfish. So one of the things that you want to watch out for as a home seller, and it's something that your agent should be on the lookout for as well, is buyers like buying their way in, especially if there's multiple offers, buying their way into a signed contract and then leveraging their contingencies to backpedal. So what I mean by that is, say they offer a ridiculously high price. And when I go through and do a market analysis, I know how much the house is worth. I know what it will likely appraise for. So say, I tell them, it's going to, we're going to price it with the data shows its value is likely 500. I can justify the value of 500,000 based on the comparable properties, which is what an appraiser is going to look at. And there's not an exact science. There's a little, there's always a little bit of wiggle room because it is subjective, depending on what kind of, the appraiser, how the appraiser approaches it, but not huge, not $20,000. So if it would not be uncommon especially during the crazy times, for buyers to come in higher, but if they come in substantially higher, say you get an offer 575, buyers are hot to trot, and they don't waive the appraisal, which is something that we saw, because if there's no appraisal contingency, they can't back out if the appraiser says nope, it's not worth 575. If they don't waive the appraisal and they come in at a ridiculously high price that is not going to get appraised because there's absolutely no data to support it, they're fishing. And all they're doing is they're just getting it so that you can, Paul, just like, not to say this is exactly what happened, but in a situation like that, you would bite, get your offer accepted, then they do a home inspection. And here comes the laundry list of repairs. And now they want to renegotiate down to 525, 520. Or they decide to, 520, or take it or leave it, or we back out, and then on to the next. It's kind of a scummy way to do things, and you got to be on the lookout for it. If it is too good to be true, guys, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. If you get a cash offer, that is a sweet deal. The only thing I would say is make sure they get the money. Make sure your agent vets that out. But 9 times out of 10, if it's too good to be true, there's going to be, those are my red flags. All right, I'm going to jump down here and see. Oh, Krista, I got a 5.5% rate and only paid $189 to buy down. Fantastic. Wow. Holy cow. That deserves a cheer. That's fantastic. Good for you. Holy cow. All right, guys, don't forget to put your QQQ before the questions. I can make sure that so I don't miss it. All right, Miss H says, when a neighbor is selling their home and they want to sell it to the neighbor, is that strange or anything wrong with that, or not have realtors thinking something strange by doing? Yeah, no, that kind of stuff happens all the time. The thing that I always tell folks is that, yes, if it's, your neighbor that you love and, you get along and you really want them to have the house, and you're not concerned that you might be underselling the house because of that emotional tie, the sale price is not the end all be all. The sale price, it's the root of a transaction, and the reason why people do the things they do. It's not always like about money. Yeah, money's a big part, but you have situations where it's like, you know what, I really, this neighbor has done is like family to me and all the things. Or if I was selling my house to my kids, you think I'd sell my house to my kids at the same price that I'd sell a stranger? Well, I mean, if you say yes, like, okay, I'm not going to pass judgment on you. I kind of am, but I won't. But I won't. Of course not, because they're my kids. Of course, I'm gonna not. I'm not going to. I'm okay with leaving some money on the table. But if that's not the case, then you really need to understand what the number is, because there will be neighbors that take advantage of you in looking at, a price. You think that price is great, and then you have an agent come in, you do some data, data research on your own. You find out, well, they're just throwing a low number in to get their foot in the door, because, and enticing me. You got to look at the sum of the parts. The other component that, you want to think about is, uh, you know, sometimes it isn't about price. Sometimes you just don't want to have people in the house. Sometimes you just don't want to go through the hassle of getting the house ready, or all the things. There's a lot of moving parts. You got to take that all into consideration. And I always recommend do a pros and cons list. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You get down on paper, draw a line in the middle. I tell my clients all the time, if you're undecided about something, pros and cons list will get you through that 110%. Um, all right, I'm just going to da, 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 da. Dun, dun, dun. I actually have background music while I'm reading the chat. All right. Manual. Yes, and I think you were the one that might have sent me in the question about the new mass law for home inspections, about the sellers can't force to waive on the home inspection. I am going to touch on that today. So I'm gonna, after I get through these articles, I want to touch on the new mass law with home inspections, because I think it's worth a conversation for sure, for sure. Okay. I want to just jump back to this article, just kind of close the loop on this. And Joe Chavez is a Redfin Premier Agent, Kansas City. He says they've seen a lot of buyer's remorse. Buyers are making an offer, then they start to worry that they could have found a better deal or a better home, because there are more home sellers than buyers in the market. Some other buyers are backing out because they're concerned about job security. When you are getting an offer as a home seller, I'm going to approach this two different ways. When you're getting an offer as a home seller, your agent should be vetting out the offer. What do I mean by that? When I get an offer and I go through all the components of that offer, including the pre-approval letter. That pre-approval letter, I have a conversation. I will try to do it. Sometimes I do it by phone. Sometimes I do it by email. I like doing it by email with the lender, because then I have a written copy of our conversation. But one of the things that I ask now, the lender cannot give me any confidential information. They cannot tell me, what their FICO score is and all the things. However, what I'm looking for is the strength of the borrower, and ask, have you verified employment? And then I do some research, and you can do this on your own as a home seller. Find out what your buyers do for a living. If your buyers work for the federal government and they're putting 5% down, I'm not saying don't accept the offer, but you can see where I'm going with this. You got to go into it with your eyes wide open. Job security. Now, as a buyer, here's a big thing. As a buyer, and I've seen this time and time again. One of the things that I can count on one hand, literally, not use up all my fingers on how many of my buyers had buyer's remorse and backed out over the years. And that's not bragging. The reason being is because I will not go and show them a house. I will not meet with them to look at any properties until we have a chat, till we have a consultation. I need to understand. I need to understand why they're buying. I need to understand, what are they nervous about? What are their goals? What's their wish list? What's their non-negotiables list? I need to understand fully what it is that they're trying to achieve and how they want to achieve it and what they're concerned about, because those are the things that I'm going to remind them when emotions get high and you find the house that you love. You know what? If you let those emotions help you navigate making an offer on a house, it very well could backfire because you take one look at the news and you say, "Oh my God, there's more inventory." Well, geez, that house looks like it's a little bit better. I really don't want to buy this one now. You know, you need to be crystal clear on what it is that you're looking for, and why you're looking for it, and all the things. How, affordability, every single point, because those are the things that are going to help you make that decision, whether you just, you know, not just willy-nilly put an offer in, but actually commit to the offer. It's super important. Mm, sorry. This New England, cold weather, my heat is coming on more often. Sore throat, dry throat. So sorry for all the tea sipping. I have a tendency to have a very dry throat when I'm talking a lot. So and it is the season, unfortunately. And I got my R2D2 mug. I mentioned that last week. For those that are Star Wars nuts. All right, it says buyers are retreating from the Sun Belt. I mentioned that a little earlier. In many metros of that part of the country, less appealing than they once were. That's because everyone flocked there during pandemic. Prices are soaring, and now growing climate risk, HOA fees, insurance premiums, would be buyers in places like coastal Florida holding off. Sunbelt states are also building more than anywhere else, prompting buyers to back out because they're confident they'll be able to find something else. Economic uncertainty is playing a role as well. I'm going to touch on that in the next topic with the Fed update, because those economic uncertainty, the consumer index numbers were released despite the government shutdown, consumer confidence index. So I'm going to go over those numbers. It says most contracts that fall through due during the inspection period. So we kind of talked about this already. This is whether when neither side is willing to compromise. Negotiations on home purchase agreements often break down prior to closing, typically during the inspection period, and more than 70% of deals fall through during that time period. When I'm counseling a home seller, you know what? We have once an offer is accepted and signed, verbal acceptance is not an accepted offer. It has to be signed. 2 signatures on a document, creates that formal agreement, legally binding agreement. There are a few exceptions if it was done in an email. There are a few exceptions where you could get, the court would say it's legally binding. But for all intents and purposes, it's signatures on a paper. I tell my home sellers, don't celebrate. Don't celebrate. We've got a lot of hurdles to get through. We've got a lot of things to get through before we head into the home stretch, and the home inspection is one of the majors, because that is usually where we make or break. And trying to get that done as soon as possible. I typically want to see it done within the 7 days after offer accepted, period. Okay. Do not let it go further than that, because if they do back out and put it back on the market, lickety split. But it says it's a buyer's market, most of the US. Those who are still in the market know that they have leverage. This is true. It's common to be choosier and ask for repairs, price reductions, and other concessions. When sellers push back, or when inspections reveal new issues, many buyers are walking away. A lot of buyers are also eyeing homes at lower price points, which are more likely to have inspection issues. There's, again, managing expectations on what you're going to get for your money. Managing expectations, going into it with your eyes wide open as a buyer. It goes on to, and as always, guys, I'm putting all these links in the articles, in the description, so you can kind of go through and check out the data. But it goes, top metros where home buyers are ghosting is least common. The top 10 is in San Francisco, actually. Nassau County, New York, San Jose, Oakland, California, Milwaukee, Montgomery County, Seattle, New York, good old Boston, Massachusetts, and Minneapolis, Minnesota. So it's interesting to see, and then it goes on to the all the areas that are falling out of contract, and all, through uh all 50 states here. And well, they analyzed 50 of the most populous US metros, with the number one being Anaheim, California, which is interesting, as the greatest increase. So a lot of changes happening. And, do I think that this number is going to increase? I do. I do. Why? Because of all the things we just talked about, all that nervousness, all the uncertainty that's happening in the economy in general, is going to create angst with buyers, and it's in the same respect, it's going to create angst with home sellers. Homework. Do your homework. Establish your expectations on both sides. Empathy and understanding. Try to be reasonable. Try to be reasonable. I tell my sellers, reasonable is safety issues with home inspections. Safety, the most common is like double tapped breakers. Like, maybe try to take care of that before it goes on the market. Try to see if there's any, electrical, if it's like, oh yeah, that break, always pops every now and then. Why don't you try to find out first before putting it on the market? Because the home inspector is going to scare the bejeebies out of the buyers. All right, I'm just going to scan through the chat and see what we got for questions. Oh, Teresa, you're so sweet. You may drink out of a Star Wars cup, but you'll always be a Wonder Woman. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. Wiggly Arm Guy says, as a seller, is it better to lower the price or offer concessions if it comes down to making a deal? Here's what I'm going to recommend. Understand the buyer. So a buyer's not on an island, the seller's not on an island. Takes two to tango, right? In order to find out what's going to make the buyer tick and what's going to be most important, how are you going to entice a buyer to commit? You got to find out what is the buyer what's most important to that particular buyer. Now, if you've got a buyer that's on the hook and, they have these concerns with the home inspections, then your agent should be finding that out for you with conversations with the buyer's agent. I do this on a regular basis. I have a client now who's under contract. We had a few minor things that came up at the home inspection. Nothing earth shattering, but, and they're valid concerns. And I had a conversation with the buyer's agent. I said, how would you like, what's the most important thing to the buyer? Does he want these things fixed, or does he want a credit, or do we do this, sale price, the whole 9 yards? What is important? Now, I'll put an asterisk on that and say it does depend on what type of loan your buyer's going for. If it's an FHA loan, a VA loan, that might impact how you approach the situation. They might need to have items fixed before the closing. But find out from the buyer, because it really depends on what's most important to the buyer in your contract or in your area. So in other words, it's a great big it depends. It depends. Depends, not just the thing that you find in the old folks' home. Oh, goodness gracious. Couldn't resist, guys. Sorry. Yeah, I'm a geek here. So it is what it is. Tracy said, this happened to me on my first contract on my home. They canceled 3 days before closing. Whoa. So lucky we ended up with a new buyer the next day. So one of the things that you want to know when you go under contract, you want to find out and look at what type of what are the contingencies, what are the outs for the buyers, and what is the buyer putting up for good faith money, escrow money. In Massachusetts, we are a two-part state where it's a separate offer and then a purchase and sale agreement. Some states, New Hampshire, it's all in one at the very beginning. Regardless, the total amount of money that your listing agent should be holding as a good faith deposit from the buyer that's written in the contract, typically is, anywhere between 2 and 3, 4, sometimes 5% of the total purchase price. The more the better as a home seller. As a buyer, if I'm representing a buyer, try not to put so much money on the table, but it does entice a seller if you're in a, competitive situation. But you want to make sure you have enough. If you have a buyer that only has $1,000 on the table, or 2,000, or even 3 or 4,000, it sounds like a lot. But if a buyer really doesn't want to be in that contract, or they really want out, they will walk away from $3,000 or $4,000 a lot faster, a lot easier than they will $25,000. So you want to make sure. And then you also want to understand 100% clarity. What are those contingencies, and at what point does that money go to you as a home seller? You want to know when, at what point, because it doesn't always, just because they back out, they could have protections through one of their contingencies. So, but that stinks. I'm glad you got a buyer right away, though, Tracy. That's the silver lining. Yeah, Paul T says there's a bunch of videos in my feed worrying about the stock market, value of the dollar. No wonder people change their mind. Case in point, 110%. Let's see. Man says, hello, Joe. I said higher rates and payments, but I don't think that matters if your mortgage, as far as people backing out, if your mortgage is 400,000 plus with a 20% down payment, you could cut the rate to 3.5% and be at 1,400. No PT or 8. Yeah, homeowners insurance. Yeah, potentially, for sure. I wonder how many people will be taking their tax return money and putting it towards buying down their mortgage this year, doing a recapture, which a lot of folks don't realize that you can do that. If you have a good chunk of change and you want to decrease your principal balance on your mortgage, you can do a reamortization of the loan. So what that means is, if you have this, loan amortized and your payment is $2,500 a month, if you just send them $10,000, $15,000, just, as an additional principal, and that's it, your payment's going to stay at $2,500. If you call them and say, I want to do a reamortization and I want to put this amount of money down, you find out what they charge. It's usually like a couple $100. It's peanuts, the grand scheme of things. And what the minimum amount that they, need. Some of them need a certain amount of money before they'll do it. But if you do that, you can knock your principal down and then basically readjust the number. That $2,500 a month payment, and I know these numbers don't match up exactly, but that $2,500 a month payment could drop down to $2,000 a month over, fixed going forward. If you come into some money, inheritance or something, absolutely you can do that. Let's see. Norton says, I will confess to backing out of 2 contracts due to inspection results in College Station since July. Plus, we were looking at a lower price. Finally went up to 200,000 and we'll close on Monday. You know what? Good for you for seeing, and making adjustments. But you're illustrating exactly, what one of the issues is as far as, the expectations. And sometimes, and I've had clients that just, they're not going to understand or accept the current state of whatever the market's doing until they kind of get some bruises first. Sometimes it's like compared to raising kids and teenagers, you got to let them fail before they learn. Not that I'm comparing, Norton, I'm not comparing you to that, but I'm just saying in general, sometimes you got to, And sometimes you gotta learn the hard way before you can, you realize like, okay, that is what's happening. Um, Vegas Jimmy, good to see you. Recently had an offer and we encountered splitting the difference, which felt fair. Buyer's agent totally ghosted our agent. So unprofessional and weird. What the heck? Yeah, well, it happens. Yeah, Tracy says too many people watching bad TikTok videos. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, man. It sounds like having 20% on both sides is more important than ever. I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Let's see here. Dun, 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 dun. Let's see. Matt says we literally just had our home inspection, structural, environmental, and mechanical, and they had no demands. I was dumbfounded. So sometimes if you have an 80% agent on the buying side and you are the seller, you have situations like this because the buyer's agent just wants to get the deal done and they won't talk their buyer out of asking for anything or even asking or recommending that they back out because it's just it revealed way too many things that are going to get in over their head. I had that exact situation recently where I was helping a longtime client, buy a house, and we went through the home inspection, and I couldn't have been more tickled when he messaged me the next morning and said, "Jen, we're done. We're pulling the trigger. We're pulling the plug on this one. We're backing out." And I said to him, I am so glad. I was nudging. It's his decision. But I was strongly nudging him to. I said, this house is going to be too much. It's wait, warning flags all over the place. And I'm glad. I'm glad he backed out because it wasn't the right house. And the listing agent was an 80% agent. She didn't even go to the home. She didn't even go to the home inspection. Yeah, that poor seller didn't know doesn't know who is representing them at all. All right, I want to jump into um dun, 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 dun. Oh my goodness, you guys have so many great comments. Real quick here, Alex says, I feel market analysis and official appraisals are both suspect, as I've seen widely varying numbers confusing. You are not alone. I had a comment in one of my videos this week about that, and tried to shed some light on it. The thing of it is when an agent does a valuation, it is an opinion of value based on comparable data. All it is essentially we're trying to look into a crystal ball and we're trying to make our best guess based on history, on what has already happened, using that history as a stepping stone to take an educated guess, hypothesis, on what might happen now. That's all it is. The more data you have, the closer you can get to what will likely happen. Data on the comps plus what is actually happening in the market will give you that number. An appraiser essentially does the same thing, except they go a little deeper. They go a lot deeper into, looking at square footage numbers and so forth. They're also looking at it from the aspect of it's a property. They're taking the aspect of what if a buyer, if you have a house that is really high demand, super, super high demand, and I know that given the high demand on this type of property, we have the data, but this house will likely be upbid because of the demand. I can't justify that, but I can make a recommendation, an educated recommendation on a strategy to list it maybe a little higher, depending on the market and all the things. An appraiser won't do that. An appraiser is going to rely strictly on the numbers. What's interesting is if you, I've had this conversation so many times with folks that, they say, well, we had an appraiser come through before we put the house on the market. and we had XYZ number. And then we put it on the market, and we had the bank appraiser come in, and a bank appraiser came in with a higher number. Lo and behold, the bank appraiser had a higher number. They also have the purchase agreement to know what the house is selling for. Does the appraiser try to justify that number? Because at the end of the day, if they can't justify the number, the buyer's not going to be approved in the mortgage. Yeah, they have to have data to support it, but there's a driving force there, and these, not every appraiser is created equal. I've come in contact with many terrible appraisers that don't know their what from their elbow. But it is not an exact science. It's not an exact science. When you see huge fluctuations in values, 99 times out of 100 is because they don't have enough data. Period. They don't have enough data, or they're interpreting the data entirely different. Maybe they're just saying, yeah, oh yeah, it's an appreciating market, and that's why we should offer, should list it for $50,000 more, with no basis. So it is confusing because it's not, it is not exact science, because at the end of the day, all value is what a buyer's willing to pay. Period. That is all value is. All right, let's talk about the Fed. Super exciting. Super exciting. Yay, mortgage rates, Jerome Powell. Yay. He is not the most popular person in the country at the moment. Today was day one of their meeting. And so we won't know what exactly they're going to do until tomorrow. But Realtor.com did an analysis today, and kind of did a breakdown of kind of what happened today. And it says Fed interest rate meeting begins with officials divided on policy and blinded by shutdown. And it goes on to say that they're blinded because they don't have their data. They have a data blackout. If the government's not open, they're not going to get all the data they typically need to make the decisions that they need to make right this very moment. It's a little bit a challenging position. But the other problem is that they've got, the committee is surprise, surprise, there's infighting. They're not on the same page. And it says with near certainty, financial markets expect the FOMC, which is the Federal Open Market Committee, to cut the Fed's overnight interest rate by a quarter point, taking it to a range of 3.75% to 4%. Says last month the Fed made its first cut in 9 months, following troubling signs of a weakness in the labor market. This is in anticipation of further rate cuts of the Fed. The mortgage rates last week dipped. And I've talked about this extensively, about how the connection between mortgage interest rates and the Fed rate. Last week dipped to the lowest level in more than a year, hitting 6.19%. But a rate cut Wednesday doesn't mean it will fall further, with much riding on Powell's comments in a post-meeting press conference. It says that the Fed's decisions are anticipated by the market, which means that the upcoming rate cut and several more over the next few months are already largely priced in, or often you hear lenders say that the rates are, the rate cut is already baked in. This is a great graph. And the reason why I like it is because it illustrates the relationship between the mortgage rate and the Fed rate, the federal funds rate. They typically ride along more or less parallel, in unison. And you can see that. This would be the federal funds rate, which tanked during COVID. This is where the mortgage rate went. And you can see it goes up. But there are fluctuations. It doesn't follow it exactly. Those are all fluctuations in the market. And the market anticipated them dropping the rate, so it reacted accordingly. The lenders, mortgage lenders were anticipating, so they proactively dropped the rate. And actually, I was looking at it, and we'll just jump real quick here and see if I didn't see if we can get this. There we go. So you can see that's as of right now, it is 6.13%. as of today, right in line. And you can see right where last week, 10/20, last Monday, where it was, went dipped up, and then it dropped down again in anticipation of what was going to happen today and tomorrow. It says the Fed uses higher interest rates to combat inflation and lower interest rates to stimulate the labor market. This is where it gets really sticky. If it was just about the housing affordability, if it was just about the housing market, and lower rates will help it be more affordable and help more folks, buyers come out of the woodwork. If we're that easy, end story. We're done. Live stream over. That's not as you can guess, it's not the case. It says the rates don't set mortgage rates directly. Talked about this, ad nauseum. That it is not directly, it's indirectly connected. But the problem is just like everything else, these guys make their decisions based on data, and they don't agree on how the data is interpreted or what they should do next. It says growing division amongst FOMC members, and there's 12 members, including the 7 members of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, president of the New York Fed, and 4 other regional federal presidents who serve on a rotating basis. A simple majority vote is needed to set policy on interest rates. It goes on to talk about, and again, I'm going to include this article in the description. You guys can read through it at your leisure. But it goes on to talk about how certain members feel strongly one way, and some members feel strongly the other way. Stephen the newly appointed Fed Governor Stephen Moran says that he believes the federal's neutral rate, which is the rate that neither spurs additional spending nor restricts the economy, is close to 2%, and argues that the central bank should move quickly toward that level. However, not everyone is on that same page. Says that minutes from the last Fed meeting indicate a few participants argued against cutting rates during the closed deliberations in September. You know what? Last time I did this kind of funny thing with the skip, and I apologize that, guys. It says that one member says one worrying sign is that price increases also become more widespread. I view that a sign that policy is appropriately calibrated rather than a sign that the policy rate should be aggressively lowered. It goes on to say that the inflation data that was released Friday showed that the consumer price index, now they were able to get that data even though there is a shutdown. They released the consumer price index. They did not get the unemployment data, but they were able to get the consumer price index, and it increased 3% in September from a year earlier, making the 6th straight month of rising annual inflation. They do not want rising annual inflation. Rising annual inflation means do not cut the rate. Cutting the rate will spur growth. Cutting the rate will spur more price increases, because there'll be more people buying. There'll be more demand. And that's why prices go up across the board. It's not just a housing market phenomenon. It says, but at the same time, the latest available labor data showed an uptick in the unemployment rate. So you've got like two things kind of fighting against each other. We've got, the consumer price index, saying that, the price index increased 3%, which means that they want to avoid downward pressure because you don't want, continued inflation. But on the same note, we've got increased unemployment rate, which typically means you want to lower the rate to make it more affordable, because because of the jobs numbers, and that rose to 4.3% in August. We won't know until the shutdown ends on what the current data is on the unemployment rate. Is that by design? Maybe. I don't know. Is it possible that they're keeping that information on purpose? Well, you be the judge. Put the tinfoil hat on. We will see. Inflation ticks higher and worrying trend for Fed. This is the thing that they're worried about. And you know what? It was going down for a bit, not anymore. And things are already ridiculously expensive. Groceries, gas, nothing is going down. It's going exactly the opposite way. Um, this is not necessarily a good chemistry for interest rates. It goes on to say the government shutdown creates a data blackout. The CPI data released last week was an exception, deemed critical because it is used to calculate cost of living adjustments for Social Security recipients. But other reports on job growth, jobless claims, and consumer spending have gone silent. I'm super curious to know what that is all about. So, in a nutshell, they very well may cut tomorrow, but when it has it as it relates to the mortgage market, what's done is done. Even if they do cut the rate tomorrow, we're not, the rate, how it affects the mortgage rates it's already been set. It's already the rates have already gone down, and it's not going to go down any further. All right, let's check over in the good old chat, and see what's popping. See what's popping. I'm just gonna scroll through here and see. QQQ, thanks for using the QQQ. Did you say my realtor can see in showing time how many showings it took for a similar property to get an offer? Not necessarily to get an offer, just general showing numbers. Listed 11 days ago, no showings, one price cut. It's a ghost town here in Denver. Yeah, it's, you know what, the thing that as the market changes, depending on where you're at, what's equally important is you got to know what the current numbers are for your area. What is in the available data in MLS? You need to push your agent to give you, not tell you, ask them to give you a report so you can see it with your own eyes. Hold them accountable. That's what I do. I like to show people the information. Don't take my word for it. Here it is, black and white, so they can see it for themselves. You need to see how many days to offer, how many days on the market, median days for your area. But the showing time will be able to give you generalized reports, for either town or your area, on what the average number of showings are for for the area, but nothing beyond that. But you can get more MLS data as far as what similar type properties are selling for and how long it took. The agents can go into MLS and do individual data too. I mean, I go over that information when we're looking at comps. I always look at how many great, that house is under contract or sold. How many days to offer? Did it have any price drops? That influences the data as well. So data. Data takes the emotion out of it. Blake, good to see you. QQQ, at what point should I start looking for an agent? I'm trying to hold out coming back to the States to buy until most of the winter's gone up there, and I'm looking at late February, early March. So, somebody else asked me that question today about, timing of an agent. And it really, really depends on your situation. It really depends on your situation. If you're looking to buy and you want to come up late February, early March, and that's typically where, things start to ramp up as far as more inventory coming on the market. I would, to be perfectly honest, I don't think it's too early, period. I think that interviewing an agent, and when I say interview an agent, I mean, if you're outside the area, you're talking Zoom calls. Honestly, the conversation, the consultation should be about, mine are about an hour to an hour and a half. Yes, I know it's not, you're like, I was talking to an hour and a half with an agent. Well, if you're talking to an agent and it's clear that they're 80% agents, then you can get off that Zoom call. I said, oh wait, oh, I'm sorry. My kid's calling me. I gotta go. And and off you go. If they don't want to schedule a video chat with you, either Zoom or Google Meet or whatnot, uh, that's a red flag too. But you get it. I would start the sooner the better. The reason being is, uh, not that you're going to go look at properties, but you can start getting information. You can start collecting information. So yeah, you can look on Zillow and you can see that, but then also the agent can also keep an eye out for you, and you have someone to call. So if you see something on Zillow and you're like, "Oh, wonder what happened to that property? Like it sold super quick. What was the deal there?" Your agent has the inside scoop. And you can just message the agent. That would happen to me all the time. Be like, "Hey, I'm just curious. Can you tell me how long was that one on the market before they got an offer?" So you can kind of gauge on what kind of competition you're going to have. So I don't think it's too early. And I don't think it's too early on the selling side either. The selling side, it's going to depend on how much prep you need, for the house. If the house is turnkey, ready to go, I still say like at least a month out, to give yourself a month, 6 weeks out, start lining up an agent so that you can give yourself enough time to A, interview, and B, maybe the agent will likely have suggestions to prep to maximize your dollar. You want to have time for that. But if you are in a situation where either you inherited a house or you've been in the house a long time, it may take longer than you realize, or longer than you think, to get that house ready to sell. And you want to make sure that you're not stressed for time. So I hope that helps you, Blake. Great question. Michael says, Jen, I see a company advertised on TV. They say they have a house program. Don't worry about selling your house. They will have a program that you can buy a new house, then sell your old house. Do you know? CO, I mean, talking about maybe Colorado. There are so many companies out there that will do this kind of a shtick. We Buy Ugly Houses is common around here. And they put their little flyers everywhere, and they got their signs, and they put, they have ads on the TV and all the things. You got to read the fine print. You got to read the fine print. If it's too good to be true, you can finish the rest, right? There's always going to be, nobody's going to work for free. No one's going to do something out of the goodness of their heart. There's got to be a fine print. What do they get out of doing whatever they're doing? The buy the houses that are, a sight unseen and all the things, they've got to cut their losses. They got to cover their losses. So what do? They underbid, significantly underbid the house. And then if the seller, they're banking on the fact that the seller's not going to do research. And if the seller doesn't do research, then they say, "Gosh, you know what? I can just be done with this, and that's it, and walk away, and save a little bit, save money and all the things." Well, yes, but then you're also leaving a ton of money on the table. And you know what? Not for nothing, that may be the thing that you need to do, but you got to look at the fine print. But there are programs out there that will try to lure you in. You just need to understand every aspect of what they're trying to, what they're proposing, that what they're offering. Let's see. Paul says, is it typical that the buyer's agent fee is lower than the seller agent fee because sellers limit how much percentage they want to offer, or do the buyers pay the smaller percentage difference? Okay. So first off, to answer your question, post lawsuit, yes, it has been a norm that the listing agent's fee does not necessarily match the buyer agent fee. Because it's, part of the NAR requirements. If an agent is a member of a National Association of Realtors, they have to follow these rules. It's not a law, but is a rule that if is broken, the agent could lose their license. So it's got to be separate. And the agents will say, "This is what I'm charging for the amount of services that I bring to the table, experience, all the things. This is what I charge for what I'm bringing to the table, period." Mr. and Mrs. Seller, on the buying side, well, I typically advise that the seller not commit to anything on the buying side until we get an offer, and then let them ask. Some agents will say, if the norm is X percentage and happens to be a percentage point less than the seller's agent, then that may be the case. But historically, the numbers and the data, and I don't remember exactly the percentage, the precise percentage, but there was data released a few months ago, and they looked at post NAR, what the commissions were and how they were affected, because there was so much talk about how commissions were going to plummet after the lawsuit, how the consumer was going to save a ton of money. And in actuality, because the folks that drove that lawsuit did not understand fully how the real estate market works, the exact opposite happened. And in fact, on the listing side, I'm going to say, because I'm full disclosure and transparent and all the things, and my moral compass doesn't allow me to take advantage of that, my fee hasn't changed. My fee hasn't changed, and I don't say that to be holier than thou. I just think it's the right thing to do, but not 80-20, guys. And a lot of agents will take advantage and ratchet up their fee. Nationally, home sellers are paying more on the listing side than they were a year ago this time. It just is. It just is. Nationally, home buyer agents are getting paid less. So it does have to do with how the fees are split. It doesn't have anything to do with how much the sellers limit, or want to offer, or, I think that, do the buyers pay the small? No, the buyers do not pay. Read the fine print in your buyer agent contract to make sure that you're not on the hook for paying anything more than what you realize that you're paying, that you've agreed to pay. But it is a trend, Paul. It's a great question. It's a great question. Right. All right. Retirement is underrated. Doing a live stream at 7. See you later, my friend. Thanks for dropping by. Let's see. I'm going through the chat here, going through the chat. I want to hit on some other stuff here because I've got a lot of stuff to cover. I might be going a little long tonight. Is days on market of a sold property, is that from the listing date or closing or what? Great question, because oftentimes agents don't know. Days on market, you want to look at how the MLS that is giving you that data breaks down that data. So days on market typically means from the date it was listed to the date it was closed. Total amount of time on the market. Sometimes it'll go days on market to the time it's under contract, but normally it's total amount of time. My MLS does break it down so that when I'm looking at the comp and I can see in the market data, I can see exactly how many days to offer and then how many days to close, so that I understand that relationship. That's why I specify you want to make sure that you want to get days to offer so you can manage your expectations. The days to offer, to be honest, is probably the most important, because that'll give you an idea of how quickly the market is moving. If days to offer is 6 weeks, typically it's going to take 30 to 45 days to close a house. Once you get an offer accepted, unless there's extenuating circumstances, the buyer has a house to sell or something of that nature, but after you get the offer, it's usually another 4 to 6 weeks, typically. So the data that I always would put more faith in is how long to get to the offer, not necessarily, the total market time. I hope that helps. Blue Jeans 94. All right. Guys have some great questions. Great questions. Okay. I want to dive into, first off, I want to get into the spooky towns, because that's fun. And then I want to get into the home inspection question real quick. I just want to touch on that because Massachusetts is doing something that is definitely different, that will, I think, you may be seeing that in other parts of the country. So just this is for fun. I'm going to break up the seriousness of all the offers and all the things. If you are a lover of Halloween and all things spooky, this was Zillow who put this article together about the 13 Halloween towns to move to if you love spooky season. And I just thought this was fun because of the fact that it is what it is. It's where we're at. So, and it was interesting because, spoiler alert, Plymouth is not on this list, which I thought was interesting, given that we are one of the oldest towns in the country, and there's a lot of haunted stuff. Matter of fact, Jack Osborne of the infamous Osborne family. He has a show on oh gosh, I forget what the network is. Travel Channel, I think. And they were here. They filmed an episode in a home in downtown Plymouth several years ago, 3, 4, 5 years ago, something like that. Actually, you know what? The older I get, the more I lose track of time. It probably was longer than that. But he was here looking at a captain's house that was very, very, very haunted. But number one on the list is Laconia, New Hampshire, which is interesting. Halloween is a community affair. And it says it's known for its beautiful fall foliage, charming town, perfect backdrop, quintessential cozy Halloween. If you like the nice Halloween, the cozy Halloween. We've got Bucota. Forgive me if I'm butchering that name. Bucota, Washington. It says that has earned a big reputation as the Halloween capital of Washington. Who knew? It says that Bucota Spooktacular, a month-long festival that includes unique events like a hearse procession and a ghost hunting classes. That's fun. Rutland, Vermont, another New England favorite, small city with big Halloween spirit, famed for its Halloween parade. It's one of the nation's oldest. Fills downtown with creativity, community pride, so on and so forth. It says, it's a mountain scenery, art scene, friendly, small town vibe. And lots of old towns, 1905. Denton, Texas. Go figure. Now we're getting out of New England, head down south. Denton, Texas officially embraced the spooky spirit, has been named the Halloween capital of Texas. For all you Texans down there, you head over to Denton. It says the city hosts a month-long 31 days of Denton Halloween celebration. Hundreds of events, including coffin races. That sounds fun. Haunted maze and a pedal pub. Pedal pub. You guys know those. Yeah, you're in one of those things and you're pedaling down the road. And I've never done it, but looks interesting. This says, although I'd rather be just sitting on a sofa doing nothing, but nonetheless, this deep-rooted community commitment to the holidays ensures that residents can find endless, immersive, and creative ways to celebrate this spooky season. Sorry, Texas, that does not look spooky at all. But sounds like a lot of fun. Orlando, Florida. I was shocked about this. This is, while not known for historic haunted past, is a Halloween powerhouse because of its world-class theme park, Universal Studios Halloween Horror Nights. Which actually, once I read it, I said, okay, that makes sense. And Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party was down there with my kids during that time, the very beginning of October, several years ago, and it was cool. It was all, the park was all decked out for Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party. So that's where Orlando's claim to fame. Savannah, Georgia, America's most ghostly city. Ideal place for those who love a haunted history. All right, now we get into the meat. Cobblestone streets, lush squares, historic cemeteries. Residents can spend their time doing ghost tours, haunted pub crawls, carriage rides, delve into the city's dark and mysterious stories. Yeah, there we go. That's more like it. Estes Park in Colorado. We've got the Frozen Dead Guys Days. I love this so much. The inspiration is Stephen King's The Shining. This hotel is a paranormal hotspot that attracts ghost hunters and horror fans from around the world. I had no idea that that's where the Stanley Hotel was, in Estes, Colorado. Go figure. It's also known for the Frozen Dead Guys Festival, which includes coffin raising and a frozen dead bar crawl. Independence, Kansas. This is just fun stuff. It's a major cultural event thanks to its historic Niwala Festival, which is Halloween spelled backwards. Massive multi-day celebration. Tradition since 1919. Spooky fun. Marching band festival. Go marching band. It's a festival of chili cook-off and all the things. St. Helens, Oregon. Halloween. It says if you grew up watching Disney's Halloween Town, living in St. Helens, Oregon, it is a dream come true. The city embraces its status as the film location for the movie, transforming it into the spirit of Halloween Town for the entire month of October. Giant pump. It says the Central Plaza lights up a giant pumpkin, and visitors can enjoy haunted tours and costume contests and so forth. New Orleans, or if you're down south, you call it New Orleans, Louisiana. Lots of hauntings down in the New Orleans area. Most haunted city in America is what it has the reputation for, and has the huge Halloween celebration is second only to Mardi Gras. Who knew? We've got Anoka, Minnesota, self-proclaimed Halloween capital of the world. Interesting. One of the first towns in the United States to host an official Halloween celebration, 1920. Kicks off the holiday fun early with its Great Pumpkin Expo. And then Sleepy Hollow, New York. The name says it all. Legitimately. It's a dream for anyone who loves Halloween because the entire community transforms in a month-long celebration of all things spooky. That picture, look at this house. If that isn't spooky, I don't know what is. Honestly, I don't think I'd go into that house. And then Salem, Massachusetts, guys. How can you, I mean, really? That should be at the top of the list. Like, that's our claim to fame, Salem. I can tell you right now, if you live in Salem, you hate Halloween. I had a client that moved from Salem down to Plymouth, and they couldn't wait to get out because it's so darn busy. Super, super, super busy. Lots of hauntings. Lizzie Borden house. All the things. It is bonkers crazy up in Salem, Massachusetts during Halloween. I just thought it was fun. Again, the list will be in the description. If you guys are like into that kind of stuff, check it out. Check it out, check it out, check it out. Let's see. I want to, before we get into, I'm going to jump in the comments in a second, but I don't want to lose time because I know a couple of you guys asked about this, and I want to touch on this about the new inspection law in Massachusetts. So Massachusetts did something very unique. It's the first of its kind in the country. And passed this law. It was effective October 15th. Just went into effect. Went through several rounds of delays, but essentially they got the kinks worked out, made it a law, and I'm just going to go over it real quick. It says, "How do you think the viewer commented, says, how do you think the new inspection waiver law in Massachusetts will affect the market and the buying process?" Well, in a nutshell, the Massachusetts new home inspection law, and it's good to know this if you're not buying or selling in Massachusetts, good to know because I suspect this is going to be popping up in other states. Essentially, what it does is the goal was to even the playing field from those buyers that were waiving home inspection, that were competing against buyers that didn't want to waive home inspections. So, waiving a home inspection I think it's a huge mistake. I think it's very, very risky, to commit to a property that you literally have walked through and maybe spent 20 minutes, a half an hour in, and you haven't had the opportunity to go through with a fine-tooth comb if there are structural issues, electrical issues, plumbing issues, all the things. It's impossible to know all those things, but on a simple walkthrough, it's the purpose of a home inspection, protecting your investment. And when you're competing against other offers, you may have a great offer, but if the buyer comes in and says, guess what, we're going to buy this house, maybe they have deeper pockets, but we're going to waive the home inspection, buyers were getting cut out left and right. So the consumer advocates stepped up. They got it approved so that the home inspection can no longer be waived. So what that basically means is that it doesn't mean the buyer has to, they're not forced to have a home inspection, but the inspection time period cannot be waived. And not only can it not be waived, but and this I went to I sat in on a Zoom meeting on this with with an attorney that went through the intricacies of this law, because of the fact that we could get in hot water, huge fines to the agents if we don't follow the rules. If a buyer or a buyer's agent tells a listing agent that, well, we're putting we're okay, the inspection clause can't be waived, but we're planning to waive it. At that point, I am obligated to tell the seller, you cannot and should not entertain that offer. This is how serious it is. This is how serious it is. The buyer doesn't have to have an inspection, but they cannot indicate that they're going to waive it. Why? Because that will influence the seller. That will influence the seller, and it basically does the same exact thing as in writing waiving the home inspection. What does that do to the process? Well, like I said, it does equal out the playing field. You know, the question that I was asked, someone had sent me the question. They said, well, the home inspection companies will potentially make out like bandits because there's going to be inspection on every property, and there'll be more negotiations, so on and so forth. Not necessarily. Just because the inspection contingency is there, again, doesn't mean the buyer has to do it. They can't verbalize that they're not going to do it. They just don't do it. And which means there's no inspection, which means there's no renegotiation. You just let it expire. You let that home inspection contingency expire. Will more people have home inspections because they have the opportunity? I think there will be. I think that's a good thing, to be perfectly honest. To protect your investment. Will the process slow down a bit? We've already seen that. We've already seen that in the last 3, 4, 6 months. The process has slowed down, where people aren't just jumping in and making an offer. They have a little bit of time, breathing room before they jump in and commit to an offer amount. I think that is reasonable. I think that is reasonable. There are, it's interesting to see, with the disclosure laws and, buyer beware. Massachusetts is a buyer beware state, which basically means that, the sellers, if you're doing a FSBO, you're not, for sale by owner, you are not required by the state to tell aside from the lead paint, laws, you're not required by the state to disclose things to the buyer. If your agent knows, the agent's required I am required to disclose material defects. The more I know, the more I have to disclose. But it doesn't, there's no conflict between buyer beware and the home inspection, because if the buyer, doesn't want to have the home inspection, that they don't have the home inspection. There are several states that have similar type of inspection, not exactly the same, but we have, I did a little bit of research. Washington State has a right of first inspection, requires sellers to disclose more defects, and gives buyers a contractual right to inspect before locked in. There isn't a waiver ban, but it makes the waiver inspection offers less meaningful because the buyers can still rescind under the disclosed statutes. New Jersey has a Consumer Fraud Act. It has New Jersey case law holds that sellers agents cannot leverage inspection waivers to avoid liability for material defects. Even if the buyer waived inspections, the seller can still be liable, making waiver less enforceable in practice. New York has a Property Condition Disclosure Act, which says it does not ban waivers, but it discourages them by imposing a $500 seller credit if the seller refuses. Imposing a $500 seller credit if the seller refuses disclosure, seller credit to the buyer, creating a financial incentive to allow inspections. California, mandatory access to inspect, giving them the right to the buyer. The buyer, it says that it does not ban the waiver, but requires the sellers to permit access for inspection and to disclose known defects, regardless of the waiver. A buyer waiving inspection cannot later be said to have assumed undisclosed defects. So there's some things going on with this that will, I think that might, depending on where this leads with the consumer advocacy groups, on what may happen. I honestly am not concerned about it at all, because I'm very pro inspection. I prepare my sellers for the probability of an inspection, try to anticipate anything that may go wrong. I would advise you guys to do the same. But there's always going to be stuff. There's always going to be things, leaks that you didn't know were happening. It's the nature of, living in a house that, I always say, use this as an example. When I was doing a bunch of renovations, I was getting some mini splits installed, and my electrician opened up my panel, and I'm a very proactive DIYer. I'm very aware of what's happening in my house and, keeping an eye on things and the whole 9 yards. But I don't take the cover off my panel. I will do minor electrical work, replacing outlets and stuff, but I will not do that. So when they took the cover off my panel, they discovered that there had been a very slow leak coming from the main line coming into my house. And I had breakers that were fused together. I had no idea. Everything was functioning properly. I didn't have any tripping problems. None of the breakers were tripping. Huge, huge fire hazard. Of course, would shut everything down, and said electrician, I replaced replaced the entire panel, that day. But that kind of stuff comes up in an inspection, and you just don't know. And to be honest, and you guys know, I always default to my moral compass and what's the right thing to do. Yes, it might be more money out of your pocket, but you know what? How would you feel if you sold a house to a young couple and they didn't do the inspection? Maybe they had a fire. God forbid something were to happen. I'd feel terrible, to be like, I'm not going to fix anything and all the things. So you got to be open for it, because things do pop up. All right. I have dropped so much stuff on you guys today. All right, I'm going to jump in the chat because I want to make sure that I get to all you guys. Dun, 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 dun. All right, I'm having to backpedal a little bit here. Let's see. Yes. When you dare to report statistics that are not appealing, you're fired. Yes, sir. Let's see. Paul says it is not that jobs data is manipulated, but that some of it gets updated months before because it's not all in. You bring up a fantastic point. All this stuff is it's all historical data. The horse has left the barn on most data. Most of the stuff I tell you guys all the time, we're looking at this data. It might be a month back, 2 months back, because they need time to compile the data. And then by the time you get to that data, the scenario has changed. So you're 100%. I appreciate you mentioning that. Yep. It says like jobs data could be ADP's data, not government data at all, just like a payroll company. 100%. Yes, 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 and yes. Well, let's see. Denver's prices went up much more than a lot of other places in the country. Yeah, Denver did see an increase, but I wouldn't say it went up much more because there were a lot of areas that were, in my opinion, artificially inflated because of those rates. And I talked about this last week with the Fed's strategy to buy bonds, which suppressed rates during COVID. And Jerome Powell actually at the last meeting, or at a meeting that he went to, he gave a speech a couple weeks ago, and he he said that they probably should not have continued buying those bonds and artificially suppressed that rate as long as they did, because it just put more fuel on the fire for demand and price increases. Um, let's see. All right. Oh, you're very welcome, Miss H. Very, very welcome. Appreciate you guys all being here. Dice says, just joining. What is customary compensation for a buyer agent to charge in Massachusetts? Is there a way to see previous commissions posted by sellers before the rule changed? There is not. Well, hard to say. You could see a lot of the MLSs, I believe MLS PIN got rid of that field altogether, so you can't even see the data from before, I do not believe, but it almost is irrelevant because it really has changed. And the other thing too is that before the NAR went into effect in August of last year, before the NAR rules went into effect, where the commission was being presented as one lump sum, whether it be 5% or 6% or 7%, whatever it is in your area. The problem is that there's no way to know how it was split. That was done, the only way you'd know is if you're sitting at the closing table and you had the ALTA, the truth in lending, not the truth in lending statement, but the final ALTA that had all the breakdown of the numbers, which no one's going to have except for the parties involved, and it shows what the listing agent's getting paid and what the buyer agent's getting paid. Aside from that, what the agreement says, what the listing agreement says, is between the listing agent and the seller. And then the listing agent took whatever percentage that was in the listing contract and said, this is what we're paying the buyer agent. But it's customary compensation. I'm going to be very careful because there is no such thing as, a customary compensation that would insinuate price fixing and all the things. It varies. I know what I charged, and I know what is what a lot of the agents in my area, but it fluctuated in my area as well. Safe to say it was typically between 2 and 3% is typically what we would see on a buyer's agent. Hope that helps. And I'm not intentionally side skirting. I have to be very careful as an active agent. I have to be careful on how I talk about commissions in a public setting, or period for that matter, because of the fact that, I just don't know. I don't know what's agreed upon. Okay. D says buyers are shaky about rising inflation on the horizon due to tariffs and higher costs for housing, energy, food, medical costs, clothing, recreation, transportation. 100%. 100%. And if I were to give any type of advice, 2 cents, this is just my unsolicited opinion on things. I would say save. We're gonna ride out. We're gonna until the storm clouds clear. Who knows how long that's gonna be? I'm preparing for things to get much worse before they get better, and that's, I think, the safe thing to do. Buy within your means, buy below your means. Make sure you have plenty of reserves, and be prepared. And then you don't get into a situation where you're backpedaling and you've overspent. So I think it's going to get more challenging, D. I really do. It just, right now, the data doesn't support anything else. All right. AP Good says, good news. Found out a sewer line is in excellent condition. No radon, no mold, no meth. That's good. 40-year roof, bad at 20 years. Cheapers. Insurance replacing, bad news. Buyer backed out even though we're replacing it. You know what? If the buyer's backing out, even though you've seemed like you've checked all the boxes, there's another reason. And you may not even know the reason. You may never know the reason. It could be that they are realizing that maybe they're getting in over their head and they need to get out. Or maybe they made too quick of a decision before they made an offer, and that's why they're backing out. Sometimes it happens that way, where you're doing everything in good faith and there's no logical reason, but after a home inspection, the buyers bail. So there's no guarantee in a real estate transaction. It's almost impossible to try to guarantee everything. Mm-hmm. Alex says, I had my 80% agent get a home inspector before buying that he recommended and clear defects that were left out. And clear defects were left out of the report that I later fixed as a buyer. Oh man, I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that it's you know what, you make the decision given the information that you have at the time. And if you had known then what you know now, you obviously wouldn't have hired an 80% agent, but you didn't have that same information. So I will tell you what I tell a lot of my clients. I tell my kids, give yourself grace. And it sounds like, if you were able to fix some of the stuff yourself, but yeah, you got to be super careful with those recommendations. You can do your independent research and all the things to make sure that they are on the up and up. For sure, for sure, for sure. Teresa says tariffs will affect the housing market. They already have. Absolutely. Cost to build a house is going up. The cost of materials is going up. How long will the tariffs last? I don't know. There was a interview recently with our president that and the words came out of his mouth that the tariffs are not sustainable. No kidding. We just got to ride the wave, and hopefully some of that stuff will be turned back, and rolled back. But it's going to help. It's going to help a lot of new construction. It's going to hurt rather than new construction more than it does anything else with the housing market. Pre-existing, maybe, but you look at things like standard repairs. I had my boiler my heating system, my forced hot water boiler and indirect hot water heater replaced a couple weeks ago. And one of the first thing I asked was, what's the availability? Because if it's something that they're going to have to order, number one, it's going to take longer, but number two, it's going to be more expensive. And my contractor, my installer from the propane company, said that the high efficiency hybrid Wheel McLean boiler that I chose to go with is a very, very, very popular boiler. It's been around for several years. And because of that, there is ample supply in the country right now. That is what we will be finding on everything. You have a boiler issue, a hot water issue, any component, things that need to be replaced around your home, repairs, if there's ample supply now, you're not going to feel it. As soon as that supply runs out, that's when we're going to start to feel it. And feel it big time. Dear Horton didn't have a good quarter. Nope. Paul says some markets are in this weird place where a new home can be more affordable than an older one. Yes, you are seeing that down in Texas. You're seeing that down in Texas because of the amount, and even in Florida, I did a live stream several months ago where there was new builder data coming out of Florida, where the Florida builders actually saw an uptick in new construction purchases. People are moving down there and they're buying. I have two clients, one that just moved down, another one that's going to be going down there in the next couple of weeks, and that are going to be buying property down in Florida. Just because Florida has had their struggles doesn't mean that people are flocking and leaving and not coming and no one's coming in. There are a lot of people buying down in Florida because it's still a desirable place right now. Heading into their busy season is also the season that it is absolutely gorgeous. 70s, beautiful, gorgeous weather. I mean, it is now this is when people flock down there for the reason of being, a snowbird, especially coming from the Northeast. So, um, it'll be interesting to see where that happens. But yeah, it's depending on what the market you're in. My market, that's not the case, but in the over the Sun Belt, in the southern states, we definitely absolutely have seen it. Poll. Oh, before I forget, the poll. Okay, so what do you guys think most responsible for the surge in buyer cancellation? So going from the least to the most. So 13% of you said bad agents, not prepared. And I would even put a little bit more emphasis on that because I think a lot of buyers enter into contracts that they probably shouldn't have made an offer on, but their agents pushed them to do it. But 13% said bad agents. 24% said cold feet. 24% of you said cold feet and emotions got the best of them. They got nervous. 27% media influence, for sure. The headlines and the articles, good Lord, if you are in that vortex of one side or the other, the algorithm's going to feed you an endless supply of garbage, bad headlines. The more negative headlines you read, the more negative headlines it's going to serve up to you. And that will influence how you feel about everything. And number one, high interest rates. 36% of you said high rates and payments. I would say payments more so than rates, because payments would encompass HOA, taxes, homeowners insurance. I saw a short clip yesterday, day before, and I didn't give it too much thought because I honestly think it's super improbable. President wants to do away with property taxes. That would cut a lot of money off your payment, and yes, that would help a lot of home buyers. It would help a lot of home sellers, homeowners, for sure. Where's the money going to be? What's going to replace that money? It needs to be, unfortunately, we have this instant gratification of the payment and how it affects our budget directly, but the money's got to come from somewhere. Unfortunately, as my parents defuncted the myth when I was little, there is no such thing as a money tree. Unfortunately, yes, the Fed can print money, but they're not going to give it to your state, your town, your local municipality to repave the roads, to improve your, give you money for school system and busing and all the things. And here's the thing, if your roads start to fall apart, if your school system starts to drop in ranking, even if you don't have kids going to the school system, that school system starts to drop in ranking. If it starts to become undesirable, businesses start to leave, what do you think that's going to do to your home value? Are buyers going to be less inclined to pay that value? Is it be less value to the buyer because of those conditions slipping? Yeah, that's how it works. So it's like, yes, nobody loves paying property taxes. Nobody does. Nobody. But the fact of the matter is that is what funds the infrastructure in every town in America. It is what it is, unless you want to just say, okay, it's not a tax payment, it's a town payment. It's the same darn thing. They're just basing it on the size of your home. That's it, So, but in any event, guys, I appreciate you guys all hanging out with me tonight and having the chat and all the things. It's been a great conversation and interesting. As always, I appreciate you guys, commenting on the chat and all the things. I will see you guys next week, next Tuesday. Same bat time, same bat channel, 6 p.m. Eastern, next Tuesday. And until then, guys, enjoy your trick-or-treaters. You know, if you have trick-or-treaters that come to your door, spoil the heck out of those little kids. You know, a lot of these kids put a lot of effort into those costumes. Let's reward them. That's a big, you know, bring us back to our youth. Let's get those. Let's take care of those little kitties. I even buy the little Teddy Graham things for the littles instead of candy. But have fun. Have a safe Halloween. Be good. Chicken on your neighbor. And as always, if you don't see eye to eye with your neighbor, your friend, someone in Walmart, before you judge, seek to understand. Everybody's got crosses to bear and burdens and struggles and all the things. And until you understand where they're coming from, I don't think it's fair to judge, because everyone's got a backstory. And you might find out that once you do understand, that you are closer in your ideals and beliefs than you might realize. So, guys, have a great rest of the week. Enjoy your Halloween. Be good. We'll see you next Tuesday, 6 p.m. Ciao.